Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The vast expanse of the galaxy had always been a place of mystery and danger, filled with unknown worlds and species. For Commander Sarah Delaney of the United Earth Alliance, the mission was clear: secure a peaceful alliance with the Zelther, a technologically advanced alien race whose knowledge could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But no amount of preparation could have prepared her for what lay ahead. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Aurora, a state-of-the-art starship gliding silently through the void of space. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic display, showing the trajectory of the Zelther's homeworld, Tylus Prime. The planet was a distant jewel, its crystalline towers shimmering even through the cold vastness of space. The Zelther had a reputation for being aloof, but their military prowess had earned them respect and fear in equal measure. Despite this, Earth had been negotiating with them for years, trying to gain their trust and secure an alliance that could tip the scales in humanity's favor. Sarah's orders were clear: make contact, understand their culture, and do whatever it took to forge a diplomatic bond. But even with Earth's best diplomats and experts at her side, she knew it wouldn't be easy. The Zelther had their own agenda, one that was veiled in secrecy, and it would be her job to uncover it. As the Aurora approached Tylus Prime, an eerie silence fell over the bridge. The crew, a mixture of humans and allied species, exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever met the Zelther face to face, at least not in any official capacity. The tension was palpable. "Commander, we're receiving a signal from the Zelther," Lieutenant Asha, the communications officer, called out. Her voice was steady but filled with a hint of awe. "It's a personal message for you." Sarah's pulse quickened. She had anticipated a formal greeting, perhaps even a cold reception, but a personal message. Her instincts told her this would be more than just a simple diplomatic exchange. "Put it through," she ordered. The room darkened, and a holographic figure materialized in front of her. It was the image of an alien, tall and imposing, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes, though nearly translucent, gleamed with intelligence. Despite the alienness of the figure, there was something familiar in their presence, something that stirred a deep, inexplicable connection in Sarah's heart. "Commander Delaney," the alien spoke in a voice that was deep and resonant, like the sound of distant thunder. "I am Varys, first speaker of the Zelther. We have been watching you and your kind for some time. The galaxy is changing, and so must we. Your presence on Tylus Prime is not by accident. We seek something, far more than a simple alliance." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had expected the Zelther to be cautious, but this was different. Varys spoke with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. "What do you want from us?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "There are forces in the galaxy that seek to divide us all," Varys continued, his gaze unwavering. "The human race, you are unpredictable, but you are also powerful. And you are the key to ensuring our survival, and the survival of many others." Sarah's mind raced. She had known there were larger forces at play, but she hadn't anticipated being thrust into a conflict of such magnitude. The implications were staggering. But what truly took her by surprise was the faintest flicker of something else in Varys's eyes, something that spoke of a personal, almost unspoken connection. It was impossible. Yet, in that brief moment, it was undeniable. "We will be waiting for you on Tylus Prime." Varys's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a command. "Come alone." The message ended abruptly, leaving Sarah in stunned silence. She felt the eyes of her crew on her, but it wasn't the crew she was thinking about. It was Varys. "Commander, should we prepare for landing?" Lieutenant Asha asked, breaking the silence. Sarah hesitated. The weight of Varys's words hung heavily on her mind. There was something about him, something dangerous and intriguing. And yet, despite the risks, she felt a strange pull, a magnetism that made her heart race. "Yes," she finally said, her voice steady, though her mind was anything but. Prepare to land. We'll meet with the Zelther. As the Aurora descended into Tylus Prime's atmosphere, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had known was about to change. She was stepping into unknown territory, where alliances and enmities blurred into the shadows. And at the heart of it all was Varys, an alien who, despite their differences, made her feel as if she had known him for a lifetime. The landing sequence was smooth, but Sarah couldn't help but feel a knot of tension tighten in her chest. The moment she stepped onto Tylus Prime, there would be no turning back. The galaxy's fate, and perhaps her own, would hinge on the choices she made in the coming hours. The Aurora touched down with a soft thud, and the doors to the ship opened. Outside, the air was thick with an alien energy, the landscape a breathtaking mix of crystalline structures and verdant landscapes that seemed to pulse with life. Sarah stepped forward, her boots clicking on the sleek surface of the landing platform. The tension in the air was palpable, and she could sense that all eyes were on her, both human and alien. But it wasn't the eyes of the Zelther that unsettled her the most. It was Varys's gaze, lingering in her mind like a ghost. She moved forward, past the waiting guards and into the heart of Tylus Prime's capital, her heart beating in rhythm with the pulse of the planet beneath her feet. She had no idea what awaited her in the coming hours, but one thing was certain, the forbidden romance that was slowly unfolding between her and Varys was only the beginning. The galaxy was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Sarah's heart raced as she walked deeper into the heart of Tylus Prime's capital, the towering crystalline structures reflecting the soft glow of distant stars. The air was thin, crisp, and charged with a kind of energy that hummed beneath her feet. The landscape, though alien, felt strangely welcoming, like stepping into the pages of a dream. Ahead of her, Varys stood waiting, his silhouette a stark contrast against the glowing skyline. He was tall, even for a Zelther, with skin that shimmered in the light, like liquid mercury caught in a still pool. His eyes, pale and luminous, focused intently on her as she approached, and the inexplicable pull she had felt before seemed to grow stronger with each step she took. Despite the surreal beauty of the surroundings, Sarah's mind was clouded with questions. Why had Varys requested her presence, and why alone? She had been trained for diplomacy, prepared to face all manner of alien cultures, but this felt different. There was something about Varys that disarmed her, something that made the professional walls she had so carefully built feel fragile and weak. As she reached him, she paused, taking a moment to study him closely. His presence was commanding, his stature imposing, yet there was an air of restraint about him, as if he were holding something back, something far more dangerous than anyone could understand. "Commander Delaney," he greeted her, his voice low and velvety, a stark contrast to the cold clarity of his eyes. "I am glad you've come." Sarah nodded, though her words felt caught in her throat. She had rehearsed what she would say, but in this moment, with Varys standing before her, all those thoughts seemed irrelevant. Instead, she could only focus on his presence and the strange warmth that seemed to emanate from him despite his alien exterior. "I've come to listen," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I'd like to understand why you requested this meeting, and what it means for our people." Varys's lips curled into a subtle, enigmatic smile. It wasn't warm, but it was not hostile either. "I believe you are already beginning to understand, Commander. There are many things at play in this galaxy. Forces you may not even be aware of." Sarah felt a flicker of unease, but she pushed it aside. She had been briefed on the larger political landscape, the war brewing between the factions, the delicate balance of power, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "What are you asking of humanity?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Varys's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "We are not merely asking. We are offering a partnership, one that transcends politics. A partnership that, if accepted, could change the future of every sentient species in this galaxy." Sarah frowned. "A partnership? You've made it clear that you have your own reasons for seeking us out. But what exactly do you want in return?" What is this partnership really about? Varys remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on hers. There was a quiet intensity in his expression, and for the first time, Sarah realized that he was not just speaking as a diplomat, but as someone who had a personal stake in whatever was unfolding between their two species. "Trust, Commander," he said softly. "That is the foundation of what we seek. And perhaps, in time, something more." Before she could respond, a voice crackled over her communicator, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Commander Delaney, we've detected an unusual energy signature near the perimeter," Lieutenant Asha's voice came through, laced with urgency. "It's faint, but it could be hostile." Sarah's instincts kicked in immediately. "Is it the Zelther?" she asked, her eyes never leaving Varys's. Varys's expression shifted, his gaze flickering momentarily toward the horizon. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the tension in his demeanor melted. "It is not us," he said, his tone firm. "But someone else, someone who does not wish for your people to become involved." The implications of his words were chilling. Sarah's hand instinctively hovered near the sidearm at her waist. She had been trained to handle threats of all kinds, but this felt different. The situation had escalated in a way she hadn't anticipated. "I need to return to my ship," Sarah said, her voice resolute. "I'll secure my crew and prepare for a potential threat." "Stay where you are, Varys. We'll need to move quickly." He nodded, but his eyes never left hers. "I will accompany you," he said simply. "The Zelther do not wish for conflict, but we are prepared if one is forced upon us." Sarah hesitated, torn between the need to maintain her authority and the unsettling pull she felt toward Varys. She knew that the situation was quickly deteriorating, but she couldn't ignore the strange sense of destiny that seemed to bind her to him. Together, they made their way back to the landing pad, where the Aurora awaited. The air around them seemed to hum with an eerie energy, the calm before a storm. The landscape was still, but beneath the surface, something was shifting, something ominous. As they neared the ship, Sarah's communicator buzzed again. "Commander, we're picking up more signatures," Asha reported. "Multiple ships, approaching fast. They're not responding to hails. We need to act now." Varys turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "You cannot do this alone," he said quietly. "You need our help. We can fight, but the galaxy's future is not determined by weapons alone. It is decided by those who are brave enough to forge new paths." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I didn't come here to start a war, Varys. I came to secure peace." He stepped closer, his voice a whisper now. "Then we must choose. Will we cling to the old ways, or will we step forward into something new, something none of us have ever dared to imagine?" Sarah's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her. The decision before her was monumental, and the risks were immense. But the pull toward Varys, the sense that her fate was intertwined with his, was undeniable. The ships were drawing nearer. Sarah had only moments to decide. With a final glance at Varys, she nodded. "Let's do this. Together." As the sound of approaching engines reverberated through the air, Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same. The stakes were higher than ever, and the galaxy's future lay in the balance. But whatever happened next, one thing was certain: her relationship with Varys, whatever it was, would shape everything to come. The soft hum of the Aurora's engines filled the air as Sarah and Varys boarded the ship together. The crew was already at their posts, tension radiating through the air as they prepared for the worst. Lieutenant Asha's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, we've identified the incoming ships. They're not human. And they're not Zelther. They're unknown. We've never seen ships like them before." Sarah's fingers tightened around the edge of the control panel as she stared at the digital map. The unknown ships were closing fast, their weapons powered up, but they weren't making any overtly aggressive moves, yet. She glanced at Varys, who stood beside her, his face unreadable but his posture betraying a calm confidence. His presence seemed to suit the growing unease she felt deep in her bones, but it also made the situation feel more dangerous, more volatile. The connection she felt to him was undeniable, yet she knew she could not afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. "What can you tell me about these ships, Asha?" Sarah asked, her voice steady, but her mind racing. Every decision she made from here on out could alter the course of history. "They're not broadcasting any identification codes," Asha replied. "They've just entered the edge of Tylus Prime's atmosphere. Their energy signatures are unlike anything we've encountered." "Do they pose an immediate threat?" Sarah pressed, her eyes scanning the instruments in front of her. "Not yet, Commander. But they are definitely armed, and their speed suggests they intend to make a quick strike if provoked." Sarah took a deep breath, her mind calculating the risks. They had no time for prolonged negotiation. The stakes were too high, the tension too great. But she couldn't afford to move recklessly either. The galaxy's future, her people's future, and, strangely, her own, hung in the balance. Her thoughts flickered to Varys again. Despite everything, she couldn't help but wonder if he had a hand in the sudden arrival of these ships. His cryptic words and strange warning about the forces that didn't want humanity involved kept echoing in her mind. "Varys," Sarah said, her voice low but clear. "What is your connection to these ships? Who are they?" The Zelther's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, the only indication that the question had hit a nerve. He didn't speak immediately. And for a moment, Sarah thought he might remain silent, but then he exhaled sharply, his gaze shifting toward the distant stars. "They are the Vrain, an ancient enemy of the Zelther," Varys replied, his voice edged with something Sarah couldn't quite place. "They were once a part of our empire, but they were cast out long ago. Their ambitions were dangerous. They sought to conquer rather than coexist." Sarah's mind raced. The Vrain? A race the Zelther had abandoned for their dangerous tendencies? She had heard rumors of such a faction, but they were always dismissed as myth. To hear Varys speak of them in such serious terms sent a chill down her spine. "Why are they here now?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What do they want?" Varys's gaze darkened. "The Vrain believe they are the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They see the fragile alliances between races like humanity and the Zelther as an affront to their vision of domination. And now, they are looking for an opportunity to strike. But why now?" Sarah pressed. "Why target us?" "They target all those who stand in their way," Varys answered, his voice unwavering. "But you, Commander, are a symbol. Your race's unpredictable nature, your ability to unite disparate species, is something they fear. The Vrain do not understand cooperation. They only understand power." Sarah's chest tightened. She had known that their mission was about more than just diplomacy, but she hadn't anticipated being thrust into the middle of a galactic power struggle. The Vrain's arrival meant one thing: a full-scale war could be on the horizon, and humanity, with all its potential, might be the catalyst. "We need to act quickly," Sarah said, standing up straighter. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Lieutenant. I want all weapon systems ready." "We're already powering up, Commander," Asha responded. "We'll be ready in 2 minutes." Sarah's mind whirred with calculations. The Aurora was a top-of-the-line warship, but she had no illusions about its ability to stand up to the Vrain's mysterious fleet, especially if they had advanced weaponry that could match the Zelthers. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. Varys stepped closer, his presence both comforting and disconcerting. "There is another way, Commander," he said, his voice soft yet urgent. "The Vrain will not listen to reason, but they respect strength. If we demonstrate that we will fight for what is ours, if we show them that we are willing to stand against them, they may pause long enough to reconsider their attack." Sarah met his gaze, weighing his words. The Vrain were a dangerous and unpredictable force, but Varys' suggestion made sense. The Zelther had the military might to hold their ground, and with humanity's unpredictable edge, they might be able to outmaneuver the Vrain. But there was more to consider. Something else gnawed at the edges of her thoughts, the strange, growing connection between her and Varys. It wasn't just the diplomatic alliance or their shared struggle that made her feel drawn to him. It was something deeper. Something she didn't fully understand. "What are you not telling me, Varys?" she asked quietly, her voice low enough for only him to hear. Varys didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out toward the approaching Vrain ships. "The Zelther have a history with the Vrain," he said at last, his voice filled with a quiet regret. "And I have a personal stake in their actions." Sarah's curiosity piqued. "What does that mean?" But before Varys could respond, the alarms on the Aurora blared, interrupting their conversation. The Vrain fleet had opened fire. "Brace for impact," Sarah shouted, gripping the console in front of her. She could see the incoming fire on the screen, massive energy blasts that threatened to tear through the ship's shields. The Aurora rocked violently as the first volley of blasts hit, but the shields held, for now. "We need to retaliate," Sarah snapped. "Return fire. Target their lead ship. We can't sustain this much longer, Commander." Asha's voice rang out with urgency. "Their weapons are too strong." Varys stepped forward again, his expression grim. "You are not the only one with a stake in this fight, Commander. Stand with me, and we will show the Vrain what it means to defy the Zelther." The energy in the room shifted, and for the first time, Sarah felt the full weight of the alliance she had entered. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore, it was a fight for survival. With a steely resolve, she made her decision. "All hands, prepare to engage the enemy." As the Aurora's weapon systems powered up and the ship lurched into action, Sarah knew that the coming battle would determine not only the future of humanity but the future of her growing connection with Varys. And it would all begin here, in the shadows of a past that neither of them could outrun. The Aurora shuddered violently as it lurched under the impact of another barrage of Vrain energy blasts. Sparks flew across the bridge, and the lighting flickered, casting long shadows over the faces of the crew. Sarah gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white, as her eyes darted from one screen to another, trying to maintain control over a rapidly deteriorating situation. The Vrain fleet, dark and menacing against the starry backdrop, had already launched a series of calculated attacks, and the shields were beginning to fail. "Shields at 50%. Lieutenant Asha called out, her voice strained. "Hull integrity is weakening. Deploy countermeasures." Sarah barked, her mind working faster than her hands. "Prepare the heavy weapons. Target their lead ship." Varys stood to the side, watching the chaos unfold. His presence, once a source of comfort, now seemed like an ominous shadow hanging over her every decision. He hadn't explained everything yet. His cryptic words still echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the sense that there was more to this battle than just a galactic conflict. But right now, there was no time for distractions. The fate of her ship, her crew, and possibly the galaxy, hung in the balance. The Aurora's weapons fired in a controlled burst, its forward cannons lashing out at the nearest Vrain vessel. The impact sent ripples through the enemy ship's shields, but it held strong. The Vrain ships weren't backing down, they were relentless, calculating, and far more powerful than Sarah had anticipated. "We're not going to win this with firepower alone," Sarah muttered under her breath, her mind racing. She turned to Varys. "You said the Vrain respect strength. What else do they fear? What is it you're not telling me?" Varys remained silent for a moment, his gaze locked on the advancing fleet. The battle raged on around them, but his focus was razor-sharp. Finally, he turned to her, his voice low and almost regretful. "The Vrain are not just conquerors, they are survivors. Their entire culture is based on survival above all else. They are a splintered race, the result of years of internal conflict and strife. The Vrain are driven by a single, simple instinct: they fear extinction. And that fear is what makes them dangerous. Sarah narrowed her eyes, trying to make sense of his words. What does that mean for us, Varys? How do we stop them? He hesitated before answering, and for the first time, she saw something like vulnerability flicker in his eyes. The Vrain are led by a single entity, a being they revere as their supreme leader. This entity, called the Sovereign, has the power to unite the fractured factions of the Vrain. But the Sovereign is not just a leader, he is a weapon. An ancient one. Sarah's stomach churned at the thought of facing such an enemy. An ancient weapon, something beyond the scope of conventional understanding. She didn't want to ask, but the urgency of the moment left her no choice. What is this weapon? What makes it so powerful? Varys's expression darkened. The Sovereign is a creature born of the Vrain's darkest fears. It was created using the remnants of ancient Zelther technology, something from a time long before even my people's memory. The Vrain worship it as a god, but it is something far more terrifying, a living, breathing weapon of mass destruction. Sarah swallowed hard, her mind grappling with the implications. A living weapon. The idea was unfathomable, but in the vast expanse of the galaxy, anything seemed possible. The Vrain were not just after power, they were after domination, and they would stop at nothing to achieve it. We can't defeat the Sovereign in a conventional battle, Varys continued, his voice grim. We need to take it out from within. But to do that, we must infiltrate their command ship. It is there that the Sovereign's control is strongest. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. Infiltrate their flagship? Are you out of your mind? We're already outnumbered, do you really think we can pull that off? Varys met her gaze, unwavering. It is the only way. The Vrain are too strong as a unified force. But if we strike at their heart, we can weaken them. If we sever the connection between the Sovereign and the fleet, the Vrain will falter. And we can win. Sarah felt her heart race at the audacity of the plan. It was reckless, dangerous, and it could easily lead to the destruction of everything they had worked for. But Varys was right, this was their only chance. If they didn't take action now, they would lose everything. We don't have much time, she said, clenching her jaw. Get your people ready. We're going to need every advantage we can get. As she turned to issue orders to her crew, Varys stepped closer to her, his voice quiet but insistent. Commander, there is more I need to tell you. Sarah paused, her gaze still fixed on the tactical display. Not now, Varys, she snapped. We can talk about this later. Right now, we have a battle to win. Varys's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer, a silent understanding passing between them before he nodded and turned away. Sarah could feel the weight of his words, whatever he had left unsaid, it was important. But the situation was too dire. There would be time to understand the full picture later. All hands, prepare for boarding, Sarah ordered. We're taking the fight to the Vrain flagship. I want all personnel ready for a ground assault. Prepare the stealth shuttle, this needs to be quick, clean, and precise. As the crew scrambled to carry out their orders, Sarah turned to Varys once again. You said the Sovereign's control is strongest on their flagship. How do we infiltrate? How do we get past their defenses? Varys's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. Leave that to me. The Vrain's technology may be powerful, but it is not infallible. I know their systems better than they know themselves. We will find a way in. Sarah felt a pang of doubt, but she swallowed it down. The time for hesitation was over. She had no choice but to trust him. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. The Aurora dropped out of hyperspace and aligned itself with the Vrain flagship, its sleek silhouette a stark contrast against the massive, dark vessel. The bridge crew worked in perfect harmony, operating at peak efficiency as they prepared to launch the boarding assault. Boarding shuttle ready, Commander, Lieutenant Asha called from her station. We've synchronized with the flagship's communication systems. We're good to go. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The point of no return. Varys stood next to her, his eyes focused on the view screen as the boarding shuttle was launched. The crew was about to enter enemy territory, an unknown realm filled with deadly risks and unknown dangers. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than just a battle for survival. Stay close, Commander, Varys said, his voice low, almost protective. I will guide you through. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the darkened silhouette of the Vrain flagship, knowing that this mission would not only determine the future of humanity but also the fragile bond that had begun to form between her and Varys. The storm was about to break. The stealth shuttle drifted through the cold expanse of space, its sleek form barely detectable against the backdrop of the Vrain flagship. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Sarah, Varys, and a small team of elite soldiers were aboard, their faces set with determination. Every muscle in Sarah's body was taut, her senses heightened. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her, but she had no room for fear. Failure was not an option. Varys stood beside her, his presence a quiet but constant reassurance. Despite everything that had happened, despite the complicated web of emotions and the unspoken bond between them, Sarah focused on the task at hand. She had to trust him, there was no other choice. Approaching docking bay, Asha's voice came through their comms. Activating cloaking systems now. You'll have minimal detection as you board. Understood, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling inside her mind. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it neared the docking bay of the Vrain flagship. It was an immense structure, its surface covered in jagged, alien markings, giving it a foreboding appearance. The ship seemed like a living entity, a reflection of the Vrain's harsh, survival-driven culture. 5 minutes until landing, Asha continued. All systems holding steady. Sarah turned her attention to Varys. His face was unreadable, as always, but she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps a memory or a weight from his past, something that haunted him. She opened her mouth to ask, but he spoke first. Whatever happens, he said, his voice low and calm, stay focused. The Sovereign's control center is deeper within the flagship. We will find it, but the path will not be easy. Sarah nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. She didn't know what they would face once they breached the flagship's interior, but she did know that Varys would be by her side, guiding her through. His knowledge of the Vrain's technology and defenses was invaluable. Yet she couldn't ignore the growing tension between them. There was more to this mission than just survival, there was something hidden in Varys's past, something he hadn't shared with her yet. The shuttle shuddered slightly as it made its final approach, the docking bay doors opening silently in front of them. Sarah's heart raced, her pulse quickening in anticipation of what lay beyond the cold, metallic walls. The air in the shuttle was thick with adrenaline. Her soldiers checked their weapons, double-checked their gear, and prepared to board. The moment they touched down, they would be in enemy territory. Landing in 3, 2, 1. Asha's voice crackled through the comms. The shuttle's landing struts touched the ground with a soft hiss, the doors sliding open silently. A blast of cold air hit them as they stepped out, entering the heart of the Vrain flagship. The interior was vast, dark, and eerily silent, the walls lined with strange alien symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a constant reminder of the alien technology that powered this ship. Sarah gestured for her team to move forward, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor. They moved in formation, weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner. Varys led the way, his presence unshaken by the alien surroundings, his every step sure and purposeful. He seemed at home here, like this ship, this enemy, was something he had encountered before. As they moved deeper into the ship, the sound of their footsteps echoed through the massive corridors. The layout of the flagship was alien, its architecture strange and unsettling, with twisting hallways and open spaces that felt more like organic veins than man-made structures. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was alive, watching them as they moved. "Stay sharp," Sarah ordered, her voice low but commanding. "We don't know what kind of security systems they have." Varys held up his hand, signaling for them to stop. He turned, his expression intense. "The Sovereign's control center is just ahead. But we'll need to bypass their defenses. There will be automated drones, surveillance, and perhaps even traps." "Do you know the layout of the control center?" Sarah asked. Varys hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing as though accessing old memories. "I do. But the Sovereign's influence on this ship has likely altered some of the systems. We will need to be cautious." The team pressed on, moving through a narrow hallway that seemed to spiral downward. The walls were lined with more alien symbols, some of which seemed to shift as they passed, as if the ship itself were responding to their presence. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She had seen countless alien ships before, but this one felt different. It felt ancient, like it was built on something far older than anything the galaxy had ever known. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a sharp, mechanical hum. A series of armored drones appeared at the far end of the hallway, their glowing eyes flickering to life as they powered up. "Ready yourselves," Sarah commanded. The drones were fast, their movements fluid and precise. They deployed energy weapons from their arms, taking aim at the intruders. Without hesitation, Sarah raised her own weapon, firing at the lead drone. The blast struck it squarely in the chest, sending it spinning backward before crashing to the floor in a heap of twisted metal. The remaining drones moved swiftly, but the team was prepared. Gunfire rang out, the soldiers' weapons tearing through the drones with expert precision. But the drones didn't go down easily. They were heavily armored, their metal bodies nearly impervious to standard weapons fire. "Use the EMP grenades," Varys shouted. "They'll disable their systems temporarily." Sarah nodded and signaled her team. A barrage of EMP grenades was launched, their bursts of electromagnetic energy short-circuiting the drone's systems. The machines faltered, their movements jerky and uncoordinated as they struggled to regain control. With their systems down, the team moved in, dispatching the remaining drones in swift, practiced motions. "Clear," Sarah said, wiping sweat from her brow. She hadn't expected the drones to be so tough, but their defeat was only a small victory. The real challenge lay ahead. They continued deeper into the ship, following Varys' lead. The closer they got to the control center, the stronger the feeling of oppression became. It was as though the Sovereign's presence was growing, its influence permeating the ship, weighing down on them. Every step felt like they were moving closer to something much greater, and far more dangerous. Finally, they reached the entrance to the control center. It was a massive, domed chamber, its walls lined with intricate, glowing patterns. At the center of the room stood a massive throne-like structure, covered in alien symbols that pulsed with an eerie energy. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was looking at. "The sovereign seat of power," Varys whispered, his voice laced with awe. "It is here." A low, mechanical hum began to resonate through the room as the structure came to life. The air around them seemed to warp, distorting with an unnatural force. And then, from within the depths of the throne, something stirred. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was a being, an entity, shifting and contorting as though it were made from the fabric of the ship itself. The sovereign was awakening. The chamber around them pulsed with a heavy, unnatural rhythm, like the beating of a heart far too ancient to comprehend. The air thickened with energy, swirling with a tension that made it hard to breathe. Sarah's pulse quickened as she stood frozen in the threshold of the sovereign's control center, her eyes fixed on the shifting mass before her. The being that stood before them was not entirely solid. It seemed to be a collection of dark energy and shifting light, its form constantly warping and distorting. Its size was impossible to measure, it filled the vast space of the chamber, a hulking presence that dwarfed anything human. Varys stepped forward, his voice a murmur, almost reverent. The sovereign was created to be more than just a leader. It is an entity born from the darkest fears of the Vrain, a living weapon, a force designed to unify their people through sheer power. The form before them rippled again, a grotesque amalgamation of shadow and energy, coalescing into something resembling a face. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with an ethereal blue light, burning with an intelligence that seemed to reach beyond the ship, beyond the galaxy, as though it were aware of their every move. For a moment, there was silence. Sarah could feel the weight of its gaze, the pressure of something far older and more powerful than any weapon she had ever encountered. She gripped her blaster tighter, her breath shallow, as she considered the impossible odds against them. Then the sovereign spoke. Its voice was a low, reverberating hum that echoed in their minds, bypassing their ears entirely, like the voice of a god, or a nightmare. Human, an alien, it intoned, its voice rasping with 1,000 years of unspoken power. You dare trespass into my domain. You are insignificant, fragile creatures. What hope do you have against me? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The voice seemed to wrap around her, filling her mind with darkness, with the weight of inevitability. But she refused to show weakness. She straightened, stepping forward, forcing herself to meet the presence of the sovereign without faltering. We're not here to ask permission, she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. We're here to end this war. We're here to stop you from destroying the galaxy. A terrible laugh echoed through the chamber, vibrating through her chest. End this war. The sovereign's voice swirled with a malevolent glee. You cannot defeat me, human. You are nothing but a fleeting moment in the grand cycle of life and death. I have brought the Vrain to their true form. We are the survivors, the conquerors. And you are simply prey. Varys stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the space beside Sarah. You speak of survival, but you are a slave to your own fear, he said, his voice sharp. You were made to rule, but in doing so, you've become a monster, consumed by the very thing you sought to escape. The sovereign's shifting mass recoiled, its form writhing with sudden agitation. You dare speak to me like that? You, who betrayed your own kind. Varys' face tightened, but he didn't back down. I have done what I had to. But I never chose to become your puppet. And now, I will destroy you. The sovereign's form rippled violently, and the chamber shook with the force of its fury. Energy crackled in the air, and the very walls seemed to groan under the pressure. Sarah's heart raced as she realized what was happening, the sovereign was preparing to unleash its power. Take cover. Sarah shouted, diving behind a nearby console as a blast of dark energy tore through the room, narrowly missing her. The force of the blast sent the floor beneath her feet shuddering, and a wall of sparks erupted from the control systems. Varys was already moving, his form blurring as he used his speed to dart across the room, staying just out of the sovereign's range. The creature's power was immense, and each strike seemed capable of tearing the very fabric of reality itself. Sarah fired back at the sovereign, her shots barely having any effect on its ethereal form. The blasts dissipated into the air like mist, as though they were nothing against its ancient power. It wasn't just physical, this creature's presence invaded her mind, twisting her thoughts, filling her with doubt. For a moment, she thought she heard whispers, voices telling her that there was no hope, that she was too weak, that she couldn't possibly defeat such a force. But then she remembered. She wasn't alone. Varys, she shouted, catching sight of him on the other side of the chamber. His form was a blur of motion, weaving through the air as he used his alien agility to stay one step ahead of the sovereign's strikes. We need to sever its connection to the ship. Take out its control systems. Varys nodded, his eyes locked on the core of the sovereign's being. The sovereign's power is linked to the ship's core systems. If we can disrupt the energy flow, we might be able to weaken it. I know where the systems are. Follow me. Sarah didn't hesitate. She ran, keeping low, as Varys led the way toward a set of consoles near the heart of the control center. The Sovereign reacted instantly, turning its attention toward them, its form becoming a mass of seething energy. But they were faster. Sarah dove to the console, pulling out a device from her belt, a specialized disruptor that Varys had helped develop. She had only one shot at this. If it failed, they were all dead. Now, she shouted. Varys activated a series of commands on his wrist console, and the entire chamber vibrated violently. The disruptor hummed to life, sending out a pulse of electromagnetic energy. The Sovereign screamed, a terrible, alien sound, as the pulse hit the heart of its power, a core of dark energy at the center of the room. The room itself seemed to recoil in pain, the walls flickering as if the ship were alive and suffering. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The Sovereign's form flickered, weakening, its dark energy splintering as the connection to the ship's systems began to unravel. Now, Sarah! Varys yelled. Sarah pressed the final button on her device, and the room erupted with light and sound. The Sovereign let out a shriek of anguish, its form collapsing inward as the power of the ship's core was severed. The energy that had held it together began to dissipate, its ethereal body unraveling like smoke in the wind. With a final, deafening roar, the Sovereign exploded in a burst of dark energy, and the room was thrown into chaos. Sarah was thrown backward, crashing into the wall. The room spun around her, the air thick with the aftershocks of the battle. She struggled to regain her footing, her mind reeling from the destruction she had witnessed. But she was alive. Varys stood across from her, breathing heavily, his face hard and determined. The Sovereign's influence had crumbled, and with it, the Vrain's grip on the galaxy. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice hoarse but filled with relief. Varys nodded, but there was a faraway look in his eyes. "Yes, but this is only the beginning. The Vrain will not surrender so easily." Sarah turned to him, meeting his gaze. "Then we will fight. Together." And for the first time in this war, it felt like there was hope. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.